All right, today we're diving into something, well, it's a pretty radical idea. Imagine a document, a plan, that's so perfectly constructed it can govern things all by itself, without needing any kind of authority or command. We're talking about an object that makes a change in the world just by existing. No enforcement, no execution, nothing. So let's kick things off with a question that sounds a little bit like science fiction. What if a plan, or any document really, could act on its own? I mean, think about it. Normally, a plan is just a bunch of instructions, right? It's just sitting there waiting for someone to do something. But what if the document itself, simply by coming into being, was the solution? Okay, so this really lays out the two worlds we're talking about. On one side, you've got the world we all know a little too well, right? The world of classical plans. It's messy, you've got delays, you've got office politics, you've got things getting built wrong. It's just chaos. But on the other side, there's this entirely new way of thinking, object-level capability. Here, the object itself does the work. It performs its function just by existing. It doesn't need a team to act on it. Its very presence is the solution.
So, the big question is, how do you make that jump? How do we get from that messy classical plan to this perfect object? Well, to do that, we need to get a bit more specific and define what we're actually talking about. Let's dig into what an OLCA really is.
Okay, here's the formal definition, so let's break it down. An object-level capability artifact, and yeah, that's a mouthful, so we're just going to call it an OLCA, is a self-contained thing whose existence alone satisfies the capability it's supposed to represent. The key thing to grasp, the part that's so different, is that it doesn't need to be executed or deployed or even interpreted by anyone. All its power is just baked right in from the moment it's created. I love this analogy. It's not the recipe, it is the finished meal. Now, not just any document can be an OLCA. It has to have these 6 core properties. First, it's got to be self-sufficient. 2, it has to be externally verifiable. Anyone can check it and see that it's correct. 3, it's standards anchored, so it's not just floating in a vacuum. 4, it's audit complete, meaning its entire history is transparent and traceable. But these last 2 are the big ones. 5, it's execution independent. That's the real magic, right there. And 6, it has a deterministic meaning. There is zero ambiguity, no room for interpretation. All right, so this all sounds incredibly powerful, almost like magic. But where do these perfect objects even come from? It turns out that how they're made is just as crucial as what they actually are.
They get made by something called an OLCA generator, and you really have to pay attention to the specific language here. The generator doesn't design the capability, and it certainly doesn't invent it. It compiles it. Think about it like a software compiler. A programmer writes human-readable code, and the compiler turns that into a perfectly structured executable program. The OLCA generator does the same thing. It takes human intent and compiles it into a formal, complete, perfect object.
And getting here was a huge leap. You can see the evolution. First, we tried doing this with just humans. Think about committees. They're slow, they're biased, they're political. Not great. Then we swung the other way and tried machine-only systems. But they had no context, no understanding of what we were actually trying to do. The real breakthrough, the game changer, is the hybrid model. You combine human intent and goals, but the raw, exhaustive, logical power of a machine. That's the sweet spot. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because we have these things now. A system like ChatGPT, one of these big language models, can actually qualify as an LCA generator, but, and this is a huge but, only when it's correctly constrained. We're not talking about asking it to write a nice little poem. We're talking about feeding it a clear human goal, plus a whole set of rigid formal rules and constraints, and then having it produce a perfectly complete, verifiable object that satisfies every single one of those rules, no exceptions. Okay, so we've got the object, the OLCA, and we've got the system that makes it, the generator. But this next part, this is probably the most surprising and, honestly, the most fascinating piece of the puzzle. How in the world does this thing gain authority if nobody is enforcing it? No, really, let's pause and think about that. It's not deployed like software. It's not enforced like a law. It just exists. So where does its power come from? It feels like a paradox, doesn't it? It's just sitting there, inert. How does it start to change anything? And the answer is summed up in this one simple but incredibly powerful idea. Manifestation is recognition, not deployment. See, an OLCA's power isn't pushed out into the world. It's not forced on people. It's pulled in by them.
The object is so undeniably complete, so formally correct, that other systems and other people basically have no choice but to recognize it and say, yep, that's it. That's the single source of truth. And this process happens in 4 pretty clear stages. It starts with instantiation. That's just the moment the object is created. Simple enough. Then comes recognition, where some other system looks at it and treats it as complete. But stage 3, this is where the real magic happens. Integration by reference. This is when other people and systems start relying on it, pointing to it, citing it, without changing it. That is the crucial turning point. From there, you get to stage 4, authority accretion. That's when even big institutions start to defer to it. Not because they're forced to, but because it's just the most logical thing to do.
So, what happens when these objects start gaining power just by being recognized? Well, you get a completely new model for control. You get governance without command. And this right here is why this whole idea changes, well, pretty much everything. This really shows you where OLCs fit in the grand scheme of things. Think about it. Law reacts to behavior after it happens. Code controls behavior in the moment. But OLCs, they operate before any behavior even takes place. They sit way upstream, shaping the entire field of what's even possible, making bad decisions seem illogical or even impossible right from the very start. And this table just lays that out so clearly. Look at the source of authority. For law, it's a government or some institution. For code, it's the machine executing it. But for an OLCA, its authority comes from its own verifiable, formal completeness. That's it. And check out the failure modes. You break a law through non-compliance. Code breaks because of a bug. But an OLCA, the only way it can fail is if someone can formally prove that its internal logic is wrong. And believe me, that is a much, much higher bar to clear.
You can almost think of it as a power gradient. On one end, you have code. It's the most coercive. It literally forces a certain behavior. You can't do anything else. In the middle, you have law, which commands behavior. You can break it, but there are consequences. But way over on the other end, you have the OLCA. It doesn't force or command. It simply settles the behavior. It defines the space so clearly that the right action becomes the only logical one. And it turns out, this least coercive form of power is often the most stable and, in the long run, the most powerful.
And this flips how we think about economic value on its head. An OLK isn't valuable because it makes money or generates revenue. Its value comes from preventing loss. Because it provides that perfect clarity before a single dollar is spent, it just completely stops those huge, costly systemic failures from ever happening in the first place. It's an incredible tool for preventing waste on a massive scale. So look, if you take away just one thing from all of this, let it be this simple idea. Law governs people. Code governs machines. But OLCAs govern decisions. And since every single action we take starts with a decision, that makes them the most fundamental layer of governance you can possibly imagine. And that really leaves us with a final provocative thought. Now that you have this new mental model, this framework, just look around. Think about all the endless arguments, the recurring screw-ups, the systems that are just hopelessly stuck that you see every single day. How many of them are just waiting for a single perfect object to come along and just settle the question once and for all? What critical decisions are out there right now just waiting for their OLCA?